Hi everyone, and welcome to part 2 of Triggers. And today I'm going to be focusing a lot on childhood. I know I touched a little bit on it in the last video, but today we're really going to delve into the effects of our upbringing and how that affects us as we grow into who we are and as we transition into adulthood. So I thought, why not bring my mom into this video so she could shed light on her upbringing and how that affected her as a person and as a parent specifically. So stay tuned, she's going to be sitting right next to me in the next clip. So here's my mom, and like I said, we're going to be talking about childhood, the effects of our childhood wounds, and parenting styles, and how that then affects who we become as we grow into our adulthood. So to start, I wanted to, say hi.
Hi.
So to start, I wanted to share this story, right? So I was watching Real Housewives of Atlanta, and one of the housewives, her name is Cynthia Bailey. And in one episode, she was getting ready for her wedding, and so when she went to go talk to her mom about all the plans that she's made, she wanted to ask her mom permission if she could invite her father. Now, her and her father have a pretty decent relationship, but her mother and her father have a pretty bad relationship. And last year, on the previous season, they had like a commercial where they talked about domestic violence, blah, blah, blah. And she basically told her story, which obviously involved her father, and that created a lot of tension. And so when she went to go ask if she can invite her father to the wedding, the mom was like, oh, like, I guess I just won't show up, or I'll wear a mask over my face so I don't have to see him, blah, blah, blah. And it was just this whole big thing. And I was like, damn. And then everybody was kind of like, well, Cynthia, like, this is your mom. She did most of the work raising you. Like, you should honor her and respect her choice to not want your father there, especially being like, your father wasn't as present in your life, blah, blah, blah. So then in her interview, she starts talking about how, like, as a child, like, growing up, she saw how her mother and her father were, and it made her feel like, even in her adult life, that she wished she was never born. And this is like a 40-something-year-old woman on live television saying that as a child, she wished she was never born because she wouldn't have to witness the pain that her mother went through, or she didn't have to feel like she was a burden on her in her mother's life because of whatever it is that her and her parents went through. And I was just like, that's really crazy to me. As a 40-year-old woman, you still feel like you don't belong in this earth because of the effects of like your mother's pain or your father's pain. And I was like, damn. So I don't know what you feel about that. Like,
I mean, it's definitely possible that some things in a relationship or parent relationships can affect their children because there's a projection that comes with whatever the partners are going through. So sometimes the child becomes collateral damage in the sense that in your anger, as the mom, after you've had a fight with your husband, you're going to go and yell at the kids. Or you are going to go lock yourself in a room, and if the kid needs you, you're not going to be available because you are not in that space, whether it be emotional or physical or mental or whatever the case might be. So you're just not there. And so those things definitely will project onto a child, and they may harbor those feelings in their growing up, and even as an adult, they would still have that insecurity as they grow up, because they always felt that if mom and dad were fighting, then mom is going to be unavailable emotionally and physically, or dad is just not going to engage in that sort of thing. And so kids take that on themselves, which is not a great thing, but it does happen.
Right. So based off what you said, do you think it's important to heal your wounds before you bear a child? Or let's say, because we don't control what happens in our life, if you end up pregnant without knowing it, like you have the child, and let's say you haven't done the work. But if you know there are things in your life that you need to deal with, whether it be in your marriage, in your inner self, or whatever, like, do you think it is necessary for you to do the healing work to avoid projecting those things onto your children?
I think that there's different ways to look at this whole thing. Okay, there's a cultural aspect to it, and then there's also an acknowledgement aspect to it, whether you acknowledge that you've been hurt and realize that you need to put in the work to heal. And also, even as you go through this situation, you might not have the time to heal because you're just basically trying to survive. And so if you're trying to survive, you're not going to be thinking about, I need to heal. You're thinking about, I need to feed this child. I need to put a roof over the child's head. I need to make sure that this child has tuition and school and all of those things. So you kind of put everything, all of those things to the back burner, and you don't give yourself time to heal. So you're just like literally operating on, what's the word that I could use?
Survival mode.
Yeah, on survival mode or on pilot mode, because you're just going and because if you stop moving, you feel like you'll collapse. So you just have to keep moving in order to give yourself life, just to, that's what holds you together. That's what keeps you together.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because I feel like for your generation, the culture, the theme of the culture is survive. You live to survive. Like everything that you're doing is to ensure that you're there for the
exactly.
next day.
So you're surviving. You're not thriving. So there's a difference between those two things. And also, like, based on my culture, being that I'm African, we are taught that you can't be weak by showing emotion, and you can't be weak by letting your emotions be what leads you. You have to bottle them up and just keep it going and be strong. You got to wake up, even if you've been, say, if you're in an abusive relationship, you've been beat, you got beat the night before, you still got to wake up the next morning, you got to cook, you got to clean, and just do your basic wifely, motherly duties and act like nothing happened. So those are the things that damage you and scar you for life. But now, because we are in a different environment where you have the outlets, there's therapy, there's all of those things. But a lot of people in my generation, especially coming from Africa, they have not grasped the gift of being able to go to therapy, grasp the gift of being able to talk and express your problems to somebody else, so that you can get a better, prospect of what all of these childhood traumas have done to you, so that you can begin to heal yourself. And also with that, there's a journey that you have to go through as a person and ask yourself, okay, what's in it for me? Where do I draw the line of just basically being there for everybody else and not being there for myself? And I think that a lot of us, especially from my generation and our parents' generation, we have lived in that mode of always being there for everybody else and never taking the time for ourselves. And so, self-care is important. And if you don't take the reins and start doing the self-care, and it's never too late to start. So if you don't take the reins and start caring for yourself and taking time and saying, okay, you know what, today I can't cook, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I just need a break. Somebody's gonna have to have coffee and a sandwich for breakfast for dinner. And sometimes you have to do that. But because in our generation, you're taught that when your husband comes home, you gotta cook a full meal because he's been at work all day. But then in this generation, we all work. So it's not like we have to either work together, or sometimes you just tell yourself, hey, I can't do this, I'm tired, I'm gonna take a break, I just need some time out. So you take a time out, whether you need to go for a walk, or whether you decide you want to go work out, or whether you decide you want to go for a drive, whatever it is that makes you feel better. But you have to start taking time for yourself.
It's funny because Megan and I were talking about when we have children, like cooking for them all the time. Like, are you going to teach your children how to cook and whatnot? And I was telling her, like, at some point when you get to a certain age, you're gonna have to learn to cook. Because if I come home and I'm tired, guess what? I'm not cooking. You're gonna have to figure it out. You're gonna have to figure it out. But going back to what you said about your generation and your parents' generation, not knowing that, you need to take time for yourself. It makes sense because you grew up your whole entire life not even knowing that.
It was okay to do that.
Yeah, it was okay to do that, or knowing that psychology was a thing, or mental health was a thing, or getting help was a thing. And like you said, everybody lives in survival mode. So you're not worried about taking care of yourself, and you're not worried about having to do the work to heal, because that's the last thing on your mind until like you hit a breaking point in your life and it's like, damn, like I've been through a lot of shit. And at that point, you've already had your children and you've already put your pain onto your children. And it's just like...
Yeah, and the cycle continues because then you haven't learned how to do that. And like I'm saying, it's never too late. And sometimes, you realize it in your 40s. Sometimes you realize it a little bit sooner. And if you do realize it a little sooner, that's great, because then you still have a chance, And even if you do realize it a little later in life, do it, because you only live once. And if you don't take that time. You're just going to go to your grave exhausted.
To what you said, one thing that I learned about the healing process, it's a never-ending process, and healing comes in different increments. Like, you're constantly going to be healing in your life because you're constantly going to be going through things in each season of your life. So that's a good thing to know. And then,
so before you go any further with that thing of healing coming in increments, you are an unfinished product, and you're constantly having to grow, because if you don't grow, then what are you?
Right.
And growth is painful. Growth and change are never easy. They're not something that just comes at the click of a finger and it's like, oh, voila, abracadabra, damn, I'm a princess. No. So growth is painful because you have to change things. You have to adjust to certain things that you weren't used to before. And so it's a work in progress. It's a daily struggle and a work in progress, because we're never going to be perfect. Even till the day you die, even if you live to be 100, you're never going to be perfect. You're still going to make mistakes, but the mistakes are what builds you. The mistakes are what makes you a better person, and it allows you to see where you've come from, where you started from, and each day you make progress. Whether today you take 2 steps and maybe you take a step back, but it's the fact that you simply keep moving. But if you decide, well, you know what, I made a mistake, I messed up, so this is it, then you just end there.
Right.
And that doesn't work.
Right. So, like you said, part of that is like looking back on what it is that you've gone through and how that's gonna, aid your growth. And going back to parenting, like, do you think as a child, did you feel like your parents projected their pain onto you? And then as a parent now, do you think that you ever projected your pain onto us?
I think they may have, knowingly or unknowingly. And I think that, yes, at some point I may have, to you guys, at some point where maybe I was just feeling emotionally overwhelmed, and I just had so much going on. I was stressed out and all of that stuff. And I may have, where you come to me and say something and I just yell at you, or I'm like, just back off, leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you right now. And yeah, so and I think it happens with every parent. There are times where it happens, but it's not because you want it to happen. And when it does happen, if you can backtrack and realize what you've done, and then go back to the, kid and say, hey, that time when you wanted to talk to me, I was not at a place where I could, but now I'm available. So what is it that you wanted to talk about? Like, that kind of thing. And also, like, the other thing that I feel that we do is that we don't, I think based on our culture, when we grew up, our parents were always right. So it didn't matter whether they were doing the wrong thing, but if they said it, that was what it was supposed to be. And it's a thing that I'm trying to kind of step away from, where I've learned that with life, you learn lessons from anybody and everybody. It doesn't have to be an adult. Sometimes a little child can teach you the simplest of lessons. You just have to be open-minded enough to learn. And you also have to be humble enough to understand that just because you're older doesn't mean you know everything. So that to me has become a very powerful lesson that I have to go through every day, where I now look at people in a different lens. That even sometimes the people that are really mean to you and really horrible to you, instead of you focusing on what they're doing, you kind of take a step back and say, well, maybe this person is emotionally wounded.
Empathy.
And so you begin to show empathy, instead of where I would lash out and, save myself or protect myself from this person's insults. I can now look back and just smile and say, you know what? If I can, if maybe you need a hug, I could give you a hug so that you can feel better. And of course, if the person is not willing to get a hug or to be made to feel better by you, but you can now, instead of lashing back, walk away with a clear conscience and understand that whatever they're projecting is not anything to do with me, but it's more to do with themselves, in the things that they haven't accepted about themselves that they need to come to terms with.
Yeah, I think to answer that myself, I feel like y'all adopted the parenting styles of your parents. And which is a natural thing, because
that's all you see.
Right, that's all you know, that's all you see. And as humans, that's we adapt to things based off evolution. Like we take in what we get. And so for the longest time, I feel like your parenting style was an adaptation of
My parents.
your parents, especially as it relates to like discipline and emotional support. But over the last couple of years, I've really watched you grow and become more open to accepting the mistakes that you make as a parent and asking questions, or how can I do this, or what should I do to be there, and just being more present instead of living in survival mode and just focusing on feeding us and keeping a roof over our head, because that's not all you have to do as a parent.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that I've watched and I've seen you grow into, and I really do appreciate that. Is there anything you would have done differently, keeping in mind the young ladies Kiki and I have become and are becoming?
Well, maybe if I had started being more empathetic from a little sooner, maybe that would have made a difference. But like I said, it's never too late to learn. And like you're saying, that I've grown over the last few years, and I've learned to now, empathize and just be able to relate, and kind of also shed the things that I thought were right, or the things that I was taught or saw growing up as a child and adopted, and then, later on projected onto you guys, because that's all I knew. But I mean, as I'm seeing it and I'm understanding where you guys are, and I'm seeing you grow and mature, I'm actually impressed, because, I've seen other people's kids, and I've heard stories and things that literally, scared the hell out of me. But with the simple fact that we have a relationship as mother and daughters, and we are able to kind of talk. I mean, there's some things that you do that piss me off, but it's all natural. But I mean, instead of lashing out like I would, or giving you a beating like what would normally happen in my time, I have to understand the culture and the place that we're in, and also give you the freedom to grow and make your choices and learn from those choices, even though I don't like them. But I have to allow you to grow, because if I stunt your growth, then I'm not helping you. I'm also perpetuating a cycle that needs to be broken. So
and it brings on a lot of fear, like within the child.
Yeah.
I feel like I grew up fearing y'all.
Damn.
And then
was that scary?
But I think over the years, especially through Kiki's, upbringing, because she got to witness the growing side of you, and so she's more able to speak up and open her mouth and say, okay, I didn't like this, you said that.
Mm-hmm.
Versus me, back when I was her age, I wouldn't have dared to open my mouth to say I didn't like I would have just kept my mouth shut, because I was trying to get my ass beat.
But I think on that section, the difference is that I think when you're the firstborn kid,
Yeah.
you get the worst of it, because I'm speaking for myself, being the firstborn child. I know that there were things that I got beat for that I had nothing to do with. Like, my mom would beat me up because my brothers did something. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't even there when they did it. But the fact that I was the firstborn, the idea was you should have told them not to do it. You were the one responsible. You were the adult because you were the firstborn. So you get the first brunt of it. And even like when you notice, like when people have their first kid, everybody's very super careful. When the baby's born, you don't want them to touch. But then when the second kid is born, it's like, yeah, you can just toss them around because you've gotten experience. So now it's more like you're not as fearful and as careful as you would have been. Because like even now when I look at it, when my mom now, when I tell her that I beat you up as my child, she yells at me. Like, why are you beating up my grandchild? And I'm thinking, damn, you used to beat me until I had scars, but I was your child. Mm-hmm. And you're more protective over your grandkids than you were over me, who was your child. But I mean, and I think like I said, it's a process that happens as you grow, because then you realize that, oh, okay, you know what? It didn't have to be like this.
Yeah, I feel like our generation has more of an advantage because we have so much more knowledge than you guys had, and we are aware of the resources, and we are aware of the different type of styles of parenting, and so we can kind of like take everything that we know and formulate our own, like, blueprint, as opposed to you guys. It's like once again, you saw what you saw and that's what you knew, especially in African culture, which is still very like strong, like to this day. But I feel like our generation, we just have more of an awareness of
the options that are
Right.
available to you. And also the thing is, I mean, there is nothing wrong with the African culture as is, and it's also good for us as your parents to instill it in you so that you know your roots. But there's certain things that we can tweak as we go to kind of accommodate, or to kind of what's the word that I would use, to help you know who you are. Because I also feel like, when we've moved to countries like the US, we kind of adapt so much into the culture that we kind of throw away our own culture a little bit, and our children kind of grow up in a little wedge. You're not American, and you're not quite African. So you don't know really who you are, because when you go to the American side, you still don't quite fit in. And when you go to the African side, you still quite don't fit in. So we need to find a way for you to know your roots and find your identity, and still be able to integrate within both societies without feeling like an outsider either way.
So in the book, he talks about the 5 as, and basically they are 5 words: attention, acceptance, appreciation. Why can't I say that? Appreciation, affection, allowing. And these are basically the needs that we need to be
as human to thrive.
Right. So in each of those 5 words, there are like several different statements, and basically what we're gonna do is I'm gonna read one statement to you, and you're gonna say yes or no, and then we'll just have an open discussion about that. So the first one is attention, and this is as regards to your parents. You felt that your parents, or at least one of them, directed and engaged, focused on you.
At some point, yeah.
You knew that whatever you were or would turn out to be was acceptable to them.
Not quite.
You did not feel that you were a burden or another mouth to feed.
I really don't know for that. I can't speak for that because I really didn't grow up with my parents. So I really can't articulate on that. But I mean, I'm not
So then did not growing up with them make you feel like a burden?
It definitely left some questions in my mind as to why. But I had to come to terms with it.
Affection. You often heard them tell you that they loved you.
In our African culture, we really don't tell our kids we love you. That's not something that we do. You know, it's just something that you're supposed to know based on the provision that they provide. So it's not a verbalized thing. I mean, now maybe, yes, we begin to verbalize it a lot more than we did before, but before it was never really something that was verbalized.
That's true. You felt free to explore the world around you rather than being held back. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I mean, based on the simple fact of where we grew up, there wasn't a lot of options in the sense as to, like here in the US, career-wise, there's a wide selection of career choices. Back home, the basic careers that most parents wanted their children to be were either a nurse, a doctor, a teacher, or a lawyer. Like those were the 4 most revered professions that most parents would have wanted for their children because they were considered to be stable.
Right.
So based on that, if I told them I wanted to be a musician, they really would not be very encouraging of that because it was not a stable.
How's that going to bring?
Yeah, exactly. It was not a stable industry, it was not a stable career choice. So yeah, there was not very many options.
So why do you think those 5 things, attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing, are important to receive from your parent or parental figures?
I would say that those things are important to receive from your parents because they shape who you become. If your parent doesn't pay attention to you and you're literally left to do things on your own, or you're raised by the TV or by games or those kind of things, then I feel like your character is not built, because then your character is built on superficial things, not on actual things or emotions, because
Or you
you're not
can
getting emotions.
Grow up and start looking for attention
Yeah, yeah,
elsewhere.
yeah, or that too. You can actually seek attention in the wrong places as a result of that, because you're seeking, that emotional connection that you're not receiving.
Acceptance.
Acceptance, yes, because I think that acceptance is an important thing, because, like I said, we are living in a culture where there's more options and choices. And also because each one of us is given a gift. I think that the way I look at it, that from the time you're born, God gives you a gift. And some people realize what their gifts are early on in life and pursue them. Other people go with what everybody else expects from them, and then they put their gift in a closet, and maybe 40 years from now sit back and regret, oh, I wish I had pursued my dream. But then it's too late then, or maybe it just doesn't make sense anymore. So I think that acceptance from parents as to their children as to what they want to be, or acceptance of their gifts and allowing them to use those gifts to become who they want to be, is a good thing.
Right. Appreciation and affection.
Appreciation is great, because everybody wants to be appreciated. Nobody wants to be unappreciated. It sucks when people are constantly complaining about you and finding fault with you. You want to be appreciated and you want approval. It's a normal human need. And affection, hey, affection is great. There's sometimes where you just need a hug, and you want to be able to get it when you need it.
And then allowing. And I look at that more so as like freedom.
Allowing, I look at that also more so, you can look at it as freedom, or you can also look at it as boundaries. Mm-hmm. And so allowing, it's a double-edged sword. So you need to be careful what you allow, because if you don't set boundaries at the get-go, it's harder to try and set boundaries halfway through. So you need to be able to set boundaries that are healthy and that protect you and that nurture you and allow you to be yourself.
And I think all those kind of fall under the umbrella of validation.
Yes.
And especially today, I feel like when you hear the word validation, it comes with a negative connotation, because it's like, oh, you're seeking attention, or you're seeking approval, or you're seeking acceptance. And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting those things, because naturally as humans, we crave that. Like, we want to be loved, we want to be accepted. I think where it becomes too much is when you don't have those things for yourself, or you're looking for those things in the wrong places, or with unhealthy habits. That's when it becomes a problem. But validation itself, I feel like there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with validation. I like I said, it's one of the lessons that I've had to learn over time, that validation is a good thing, but how you seek it makes a difference. Mm-hmm. And who you seek it from also makes a difference. And like you're saying, if you don't love you, then how can you teach somebody else to love you? Because I think the biggest mistake that we all make most of our lives is that we want to be loved, but we don't know how to be loved because we don't love ourselves. So in order for you to be loved, you need to know how to love you. Because once you love you, that sets a pace as to how the next person is going to treat you. Because if you love yourself, you will set boundaries, right? And by setting those boundaries, when people cross them, you will simply be able to say, hey, listen, you know what? You have gone past where I'm comfortable with, and I don't like it, so step back. But if you don't, you will accept that treatment because you're looking for that acceptance and and acceptance and validation from somebody else, and you're willing to go to any lengths to get it, but while destroying yourself without understanding what you're doing. So I think that self-love is the most important thing that we all need to learn. Love you. Don't wait for somebody else to love you, or don't wait for somebody else to tell you how you want to be loved, because the only person that knows how you want to be loved is you. And once you set those boundaries and once you set that standard, then there's no going back. And nobody else can teach you any old way, because they know that this person knows who they are and they know what they're worth. It's about knowing what you're worth. Because if you're going to sell yourself on the market for 2 cents, then people are going to treat you like a 2-cent buy,
Right.
like a 2-cent purchase. But if I'm going to set myself up that I'm a $2 million purchase, then hey, I'm going to act like it, and I'm going to walk like it, and I'm going to talk like it, because I know who I am, period.
I just want to read this passage. And it says, at the same time, as adults, we can see that our present problems cannot be blamed on how our parents acted, except in the cases of severe trauma that debilitates us in some way. We do not react to ourselves and others based on what our parents were like. Our trigger reactions arrive out of what we are still holding on to from what happened to us in their home. Thus, a way to be free of childhood influences is to separate the opinion of mother about us from the reality of who we are and who we were and are.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes, and it's important to acknowledge your mistakes and know that nobody else can control your mind but you. So whatever choices you make, don't make the excuse that I'm making them because of what so-and-so did to me.
right.
You're making the choice because that's what you are comfortable doing at that particular point in time. So we have to own our decisions and live up to them. So if I'm going to decide I'm going to do some stupid nonsense, I can't then hold somebody else accountable.
Right. Because you made the choice.
Because you made the choice. So you have the power of choice to decide what you want to be. And just because somebody did something to you in the past, it doesn't mean that that's what has to shape you. Because you can decide that I am not going to let that shape me. I'm going to get beyond that, and I'm going to excel to the next level and become even better, and not perpetuate that cycle and break it.
Yep. Do the healing work.
Yes, do the healing work. Thank you guys for watching, and all the things that I said pertain to me and my life personally. So,
But she
don't
dropped
be quoting me.
She dropped some gems in there, so apply what you would like.